Good evening! Hello everyone! Jason here with Phase Shift Games.
Scott Smith, designer of Drop Drive, Dungeon Drop.
Welcome back again, Scott. Thanks for joining, and thanks to all of you watching along. This is now our third in this series of Drop Drive kind of deep dives. We just to level set with everyone who hasn't been here before, we're each week or every other week or so, we're picking apart one piece, one major chunk of Drop Drive, because there's so much to explore in the game, which is a big part of the game itself as well. It's meta. There's so much to explore that we really just wanted to take time on each of these different sessions and dive into different elements of the game. So the first time we met, Scott, I think we did overview, like just kind of, it's a sandbox game and there's all these different things that you'll be able to do, and kind of we showed some general artwork and kind of the overall framework of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the first week. Then we did, last time we met, which was before Father's Day, so we skipped a week. We did a deep dive into the map area, just kind of like what's in this galaxy in Drop Drive, all the things that you're gonna encounter, your asteroids and planets and the sun and all of that, right? So now this week we wanted to, and this is an important week, it's kind of a special one, because in a lot of ways I think this is maybe what sparked the game, and I'll let Scott speak to that, but I think this week's topic is really what sets it apart from Dungeon Drop, which was obviously our first release. Is that true, Scott? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the core departure, because both the games obviously start in the same way, but the core change between these two projects is what happens after the crazy stream of components hit the table. I mentioned, I think last week, that in some of my play testing, people would comment that wouldn't it be cool if we could actually get into this space and be in the dungeon with Dungeon Drop, and sort of that was kind of the kernel of the idea that made me want to return to this space in a really different way. So you do that in Drop Drive. You are a spaceship token that enters this tabletop universe and navigates it. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But that physical presence on the table, which really doesn't exist in kind of the abstract game that is, some of what drives the puzzly nature of Dungeon Drop. This one is much more concrete in terms of where you are and where you're going.
Awesome. Well, let's show people a little closer what we're talking about. So what I'm pulling up on the screen here, folks, is you're seeing, I think we showed this picture last week, but this is a little closer up. This is now a ship front and a ship back. Now, there's a strong parallel here to Dungeon Drop, where you had a race card and a class card, and they meet up, and that creates your character. Well, a lot of that same elements going on here, but then it really goes deeper. These aren't just the only two cards. You're going to separate them, put other upgrades in between, and so on. But let's just take this simple approach of the ship front and the ship back for the moment. Now, one thing I want to say really quick, the artwork is actually near final for these two pieces that you're seeing here, but the iconography and the graphic design, the layout of the different elements and the title bars, that's all placeholder. So we haven't gone through formal graphic. It's called graphic design, different from artwork. The artwork we love. Oh, that's great. The ship front, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, that's from the Mechanids culture, and then the back is the Dusters, I think.
Dusters, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So there's 5 different cultures in the game. These are 2 of them, and those 5 cultures will get pulled in all different ways too. So if you just kind of accept for the moment that all the bits around the artwork are all placeholders, but let's look at 2 in particular. On the ship front card, you see where it says 4 with the little down arrow. What's that?
That is your ship's drop drive sort of rating. And essentially what this is how accurate your drop drive is when you use it in the game. You will have the choice to activate one of your two drives, either what we're calling your rocket drive, which in some ways is more like traditional drive, and your drop drive. Your drop drive essentially is a height. So we're going to be referring to various versions of this tool at different times, but just as an example, you know, this is a tool that can have a height when standing up straight, and you will, when you engage your drop drive, you will get to pick your ship up off of the table and drop it back into the tabletop anywhere you want in the play space. The only trick is you're going to look at that number, your drop drive rating, and drop it back into the space from that height. And really what it does is simulate in a really physical way kind of how accurate the drive is, right? So if you have kind of a good rating, a low height to drop from, you can come into the tabletop space fairly accurately, as your ship kind of bounces in from where you dropped from, because it's sort of a flat token shape. If you have a higher height, you have a little bit more unpredictability from that first bounce where it kind of lands in, and we really liked how this kind of physically simulated just like dropping out of kind of some kind of warp space, hyperspace back into real space, and how almost like how well you were navigating that transition between those two spaces. And it's a funny thing, it's kind of like rolling dice. Even if you have a 20-sided dice, you can still roll 15, or even if you have a 20-sided dice, you can still roll a 6, right? It's a similar type of thing, right? You can sometimes have a very accurate drop from a high distance, just as accurate as from a low distance. But every once in a while, dropping up high bounces a little further than you expected, and so there's just a little bit of inaccuracy there. So you kind of have to factor that into your decision making, when you choose, if you choose to engage that drive.
Yeah, well, I think, it's interesting, the variability in such a short distance. And, for many of our fans that are here, you're familiar with us because of Dungeon Drop, right? And we say in the rule book for Dungeon Drop, drop the cubes from a height of about 6 inches above the table, or 15 centimeters if you're in other countries, whatever that is. So, and I remember in the early days, some people were like, 6 inches, that's they go everywhere. And of course then we have the walls to help contain it, but 6 inches is not much. It's this amount of space. That's 6 inches. Mm-hmm. But dropping from there, plastic cubes can scatter really fast. Yeah. But if you were at 1 inch, it could go almost nowhere. And so that variability, I mean, what Scott's talking about, so these drop drive ratings on any given ship might go from 1 to 4, I think, or in our new version, it's actually more like 3 to 6. So, but
yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that it really is inches. What Scott held up, we're going to show you much closer because that's kind of the point of tonight. But this tool here that you're going to see much more of, and it comes apart and goes together. You're going to see that. But each one of these links on this tool, there's a bunch of these separate links, and they're each 1 inch. So imagine if you have 6 of these connected, and you're dropping from that height. That's like 6 inches above the table in Dungeon Drop. So, great. That's the drop drive. That's over on the left. And again, the iconography that you see here is totally just placeholder, guys. So don't think of that as the final. But then over on the right card, the ship back, in the upper right corner is this little squiggly thing. And that is called what Scott just referred to as the rocket drive. And so that also has a rating, in this case of 3. And that is also going to be talking about the length of your navigation tool, which we'll get into. Yeah. So let me... Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jason. You can finish.
Well, I was going to switch over the imagery, but go ahead while I still have this up.
Well, one quick note, for anybody who's played Dungeon Drop, because I think, those are a lot of the people that we'll be talking to before this game launches. Jason was just saying there's a huge amount of variability when you drop a cube onto the table from even some of these small distances. Anyone who's played Dungeon Drop knows that. This is a little bit different. We'll have more of a sort of a flat disc. It won't be round like this because, as Jason knows, this round edge leads to some difficult, like you can rolls
to the other house,
have
the next house.
But because it's flat, and when you drop it from this distance, it's not quite like a cube. It sort of bounces a little ways away, but it doesn't like run all the way across the table. So you'll find there's a new physical dynamic going on here, but it's still one with some fun variability for sure. All right, keep going.
All right, so let's talk about this navigation tool a little bit more. And I just switched over. You're going to see a slideshow. There's going to be a bunch of pictures, and there are pencil sketches, there are CAD drawings, there's prototype 3D prints. There have been so many versions of this navigation tool that we've been working on. And then here you see right there is just, again, a picture of the actual game area. Once again, a prototype game. It's on a dungeon mat with dungeon walls from Dungeon Drop. That's just because we don't have our space walls and our space mats yet, so keep that in mind. But just wanted to start showing folks just what goes into building something like this. This is not just, oh my God, I can't believe I was about to say this is not just a mini, like a mini from a minis game, Zombicide or any of the other ones where they have. There's a lot that goes into minis. I'm not taking away from that, but they are a single piece of artwork that has to be 3D sculpted and then molded. What we've created here had to be engineered. And so what began with an effort that I started with my local robotics team. So just a really quick segue. My son Logan is in Team 195, which is one of these first robotics leagues. These are the big, huge robots that are constructed over many months, and then they compete in these giant arenas and competitions. Our team in Southington, Connecticut is one of the world champions. We got third place last year, the year just before COVID. So it's a kick-ass team, robotics team. Awesome. And I'm part of the mentor group there. I do a lot of the finance for the team. But so I was able to work with them, some of the kids, some of the engineers on the actual robotics team to generate the first version of the prototype of this tool. And so that was awesome to have their help engineering this 3D piece and to start printing versions of it. But where we hit a limit there was, the limit of the capabilities of the 3D printers that most people have nowadays. It was able to get us so far, which was great. But we ended up commissioning out to somebody in the gaming industry. I don't think you'd know him by name, but he has worked on some super complex 3D molding and plastic part molding for games like I keep wanting to say Forbidden Island. Fireball Island, thank you. Which obviously was a massive project, a multi-million-dollar campaign. And he's done a bunch of other gaming projects. He's worked on licensed Marvel toys like that are in Toys R Us and some of these other places. So he's done some really high-level stuff. And we've worked with him, and so a lot of the pictures that you're seeing are literally his sketches, and then ultimately some of the super complex CAD drawings come from him. This is the level that we felt we needed to go with this, because the nav-tool that's used in both of these rocket and drop drive that Scott described, we want this thing to be fun, rock solid in terms of its engineering and its function. We want it to be something that is able to be manipulated in the game, so that it's not just something that you construct once and it's a hard process. No, we want this thing to be something that during the game you get an upgrade and it increases your rocket drive length, you snap another link on. That snapping and getting to that level of kinetic finesse, that takes serious precision engineering. So this is something we're super proud of. A lot of work has gone into this. The game design combined with the functional engineering design of a tool like this, I think is going to be something that really sets this game apart. So that's the pictures that you're starting to see there. Scott?
And it's something I know both you and I, and certainly I think a huge percentage of people that are in board gaming are pretty tactile people, and one of the reasons why we love board games as opposed to just the computer version, because you get to hold these things and manipulate them. We all have our favorite games, or we have a part that we just like to fiddle with, whether I'm just like messing with the little houses in Catan, or stacking those little fun toy bits and reef, but we want this piece to be like that, right? I think that's the goal, is that this is literally a fun thing to hold and to mess with, as you switch back and forth between your rocket drive and your drop drive, and you have to adjust this tool. Now in this old version it like clicks apart by going up and down, but our new one we want to kind of interlock much more easily, and we don't want that to be a chore, right? We want you to actually almost like want to switch, because it's fun to click and unclick these things really, really easily. So I think that's the goal here, is to create something that is a little toy hidden in this game, a fun thing to use for sure.
So I'm going to show a whole evolution of a bunch of these prototypes, and then the final one that is, I mean, I won't say it's final, we're still tweaking it, but it's so close to what we're going to print in China, probably 1 million of these links. But before I do, Scott, you explained the drop drive and how you hold the appropriate length vertically on the table and you're dropping your ship from a certain height. How does the rocket drive work?
Right up. So that's the big difference here, right? And so, if your rocket drive exists as a sort of stick, right, you can kind of imagine it that way, that comes straight up from the table and determines that height that you drop in from. You use the exact same tool, maybe you are adjusting its length according to kind of your ship's rocket drive rating or drop drive rating, but then this same tool, right, gets turned horizontally and becomes this thing, that is used to construct your path through horizontal space. So your kind of your flight path over the tabletop horizontally, as you actually do more interacting with the bits that are on the table. That is the rocket drive, but it's the same tool, just here it's used in all sorts of winding, interesting ways horizontally on the table, but then you hold it straight, it transforms into your drop drive, right? And hopefully you can switch back and forth between these things really easily. Give you two slightly different play experiences, right? One as kind of a small randomizer of where you enter space, and the other as a much more kind of careful tool that you weave your way between all the bits in our game.
So how did the rocket drive begin? Because when you first pitched this game to us, you didn't have 3D printed components from your local robotics team.
No. And I considered a lot of ways of, I began this talk by just saying that, I knew I wanted your ship to be in the system physically, but I did actually consider a whole bunch of ways for it to move around, some of which I may have talked to Jason more about than others. I remember going all the way back to my first prototypes. You could the first playtest or two of this game, you could literally run out of gas like in the middle of space. That was before even the drop drive was worked out right, which is a huge problem. But I at one point I was even experimenting with something that's a little bit more akin to the solo mode of Dungeon Drop, but you were kind of like slingshotting your ship between two stars. They were stars at that point. They were almost more like pillar cubes, and you were kind of trying to fling, like kind of measure yourself through 2 points. It ended up being much too complex. Anyway, we got to a much more physical space, but it was a string for a long time. It was my trusty string. I had this little string. I left it at my other house, but it had just a number of I marked it all out with different distances, colored it just colored it differently so you could kind of see those different distances easily. And I would work with this string, and I played countless games of this thing with the string, trusty string. But a string has one big difference that is a killer when you're comparing it to something like this. With this tool, when I put it into some of these unique winding shapes, it stays there, and I can just kind of hold it there and move my ship and stuff. A string, although it bends into infinite shapes, the minute you kind of start to let go of it, it wants to snap back into whatever its original position is, which makes it a challenge. So we have a love-hate relationship, my navigation string, for a long time.
But in the original prototype and game that you had envisioned, it was called the string drive. It literally was a thick. Yeah. It's hard. It's almost like it was a thin piece of rope. I mean, it was called string drive, but it was almost like a rope.
Yep.
And it was wicked cool. We loved playing with it that way for the first however many months. And I don't even remember which of us had thought about an alternate approach besides the string, but at some point in between you, me, and Darren talking, we ultimately concluded we should try some kind of a plastic component.
Well, we had a huge conversation about all the different ways you can. I remember we were talking about making it almost like those fidget sticks with an elastic between cubes that could snap into, or a chain works.
Oh, chain! We talked about a chain. That's right.
Well. Yeah. There were a lot of different things we were kind of playing around with. The nice thing about my string, when I was just playing with myself, was that I could use it for every player, because I had marked it all these different lengths, and I could see that really easily. With these tools now, which was something I couldn't have ever made myself, each player will have their own one of these, and that's actually really important. We were talking about making this like a fun sort of little toy built into the game. That's important. Like, everybody will have their own one of these to mess with and clip and unclip, and to make your length for your ship. So unlike my string, which was kind of you passed it around the table and stuff, this opens up all kinds of new fun possibilities.
Yeah, so I know some of the design considerations with the string. Not only did you have to hold it with two hands in the correct contorted shape, and then simultaneously use your pinky to try to move the ship or whatever, that was hard. And if you let go of one hand, it would lose the shape. But you'd basically say you all agreed I can go from there to there and pick up those two asteroids, right? So that it had its challenges. With the nav tool, what we wanted, as Scott mentioned, holding its shape is important, because now with one hand I can hover this over the table, and I can look down, where my ship is, and I can be like, oh, okay, I want to adjust this slightly this way and there, and boom, that gets me from here to here, and it gets me all the stuff that's underneath in the flight path. That's important, to be able to do that with only one hand. And we had, so you're kind of hovering this over the table a little bit, from just a little bit of height, just enough so that you don't bump the components. And to me, that was another drawback with the string, was you end up kind of on the surface, and you're nudging, and you're bumping asteroids, and they're moving out of their original position and stuff, things like that. So this is a much more elegant, and Scott, I think you told me early on, you used the word toy, and I think that's important, that this is not toy in a bad sense, like it's a kiddie toy, but this is fun, right? This is actually, it feels like a toy, a part of a game, as opposed to a gimmick or something else. So yeah, let me show you some of the evolution of the tool. So this is a much chunkier, this is much thicker, it's too thick, it's almost thicker than the asteroids themselves. But this was one of the original prototypes that we had made from the robotics team. And as Scott mentioned, you can pull these up and down. So there's a pin and a hole, and they snap in vertically like that. Now it works. It was perfectly acceptable, and it holds the shape.
Yeah, I've been using this.
In fact, we kept with this pin and hole approach for many months. And I'm glad we finally moved past it, because while this always worked, I always felt like it's a little awkward to have to push it up and down, across the length. I always felt like you should just be able to yank it apart and smash it together. I felt like that should be there. So there were a bunch of different versions of this pin and hole. This one is more squarish, but it was the same principle. And they tried all different kinds of plastics, so we had to go through that. And the diameter of the hole versus the pin, and you had to be like a fraction of a millimeter larger or smaller to allow for the tension that we needed. All that kinds of stuff went into it. One thing that's interesting that we tried, so here's this one that I've constructed, and you'll notice that at the beginning and the end, this one has these end pieces, which are like half moons. Now, Scott showed you earlier that the ships, at least in the prototype, are like discs. Now, the final ones will probably be more octagon so that they don't roll across the whole table. But they'll still be roughly a circular shape for the retail version, at least. Deluxe might be a totally different thing. We'll see. So the idea here was that this now, it has some height to it. You could actually adjust this and hover it over the table, and then you could essentially put it down on the table where this side is cupping your ship. And then you literally leave this here, you pick up the ship, you put it on the other side and slide it into the cup on the other side, and now everything that's under it, this is high enough so that the asteroids are untouched below it, and you can just pick up all the things below it. This seemed like a super cool idea, and we have the 3D printed version. Actually, there's versions, we have like 5 different versions of these end pieces. This one's just like really tall. This one here looked a little more elegant, kind of rounded edges and such. The problem is, so we talked about how we went from string with its challenges to the plastic tool with all of its benefits. I feel like, and Scott, you agreed ultimately when we went back and forth on this, that this went to the other extreme. This actually introduced a different set of challenges. It's cool in one sense, all the reasons I just said to you all. What this turned into was, it almost was it's too fitty. It's too, if you want to adjust the length of this, you need to take a link out from the middle of it and then snap it back in, right? Because you need the end pieces. And the whole idea of putting it on the table and taking from and putting it on the other side, it makes it feel like we're trying to make this game to be more precise and hyper accurate than it's meant to be. Yeah. You all come from Dungeon Drop, the game, the kind. It's like, it's eyeball. This game is meant to be played in 20 minutes. This is not meant to be measure everything out to the millimeter and make sure everything is pixel perfect, so to speak. So this whole idea, I wanted to show everyone, because certainly, if people see this and like, oh, that's amazing, you have to give us those end pieces. We're going to listen to you, but we played with this a lot. And we ultimately concluded that if we can get to just a straight nav tool with links end to end, and then you just putting your ship at one, just move it to the other, it seems faster and easier, and it just doesn't need that extra level of precision.
Yeah. Another funny thing that happens with it, when it's in the right shape, those little cups, and this is something that really excited us about it at first, make it sort of hover a little height above the table, so you sort of put it down and it stays there, and you can see everything that's underneath it, the little asteroids you might be picking up or things like that. And it just seemed perfect. Then I could free up both hands to grab stuff. However, if you contort it into other shapes and positions, it can sort of fall over. And it's the type of thing, this is a great example of, when you throw out ideas, like when you told me this idea and we started talking about it, it's like, of course, that's so cool and so fun. Of course we're going to do that. But then you got to try it, because like you start trying it, and it's interesting how the conversation will shift between us. First it's super exciting, then you start to use it, and you're like, oh yeah, no, it's really cool. We're still kind of trying to make it work, and then at a certain point, you kind of both look at each other, and you're like, well, it's better the other way. doesn't seem like it. It seems like that would be more exciting, but it all comes down to ease of use and how much fun the thing is to use, and for all the reasons you're saying. Yeah, this obviously we end up in a direction where we really just feel like this is the thing that people are going to want to use.
So that leads us to our final version that we have now. We're still refining it. We believe that the final plastic type will be a formula that uses ABS plastic in particular, which gives the, I'm going to not use the right engineering terms, but the tensile strength and the blah, blah, blah. Like, it needs to be able to snap in and snap out, which means there's something that's like temporarily expanding or contracting without breaking, and it needs to be a smooth action and not brittle and all that. So I think an ABS or a nylon type plastic, which is, if you guys know K'NEX and some of the other mainstream toys that are out there, I mean, they have really small plastic parts that are super strong. That's the kind of plastic and engineering that we're talking about. So this piece is, I have a bunch of these. Scott doesn't have them yet, unfortunately. Let's see if we can get it nice and close to the camera. So this is the piece that our new friend Jake has. You see him in the pictures above. This is, you can see it's got like a fork on one end, and then on the other end it's, well, the part that goes into the fork of another piece. He's also built in, like, if you look close, you can see on the surface there's some nice texture. It's like this futuristic style, like, the original version that he made was just a fork and a tongue or whatever, but since then he's gone through and actually designed this to look like it's really high-tech kind of gadgety. So we take two of these and we literally snap them in, and that is now 2 links connected, and there's 3 links, and there's 4 links, and so on. And they hold their shape just like the others, and if we need to pull off a piece, you just yank it apart. Now we're down to 3, and so on. So this is where we're at right now with the nav-tool. They won't be white. They'll be like a light gray probably, but they look cool. They are super functional. They're exactly what we wanted. They close up to about like that. What is that? 135 degree angle, I think. 180 would be folding back on itself, which it physically can't do, but 135 degrees. So if you want to make a hairpin turn, that's the most you can do. And they look cool, they're fun, they're super easy to manipulate during the game. And I think that's a key thing, is that this needed to be something that wasn't just a chore, this is part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, one last thing that we're doing, I'll just snap a couple more pieces here together. One last thing that we're playing with, and we have to see if this overly increases the cost, because this will be a factor of the cost. But this is another piece. It has a fork on one side, but on the other side, it's just a design. It's meant to be an end piece. So, kind of like these were end pieces that we were playing with. But these, we were trying to do this special thing with cupping it on both sides and resting it on the table. Here, we're not trying to do that. It's just an aesthetic piece. So if we have this end piece and you snap it into a chain, it now looks almost like a rocket. It's got this kind of cool design to it. And that's it. So, and you don't do anything special on the other end. The other end is fine as it is. But it just has a cool rockety type look to it. It's a different mold, which means, from a plastics and molding perspective, it could make the costs go where I don't like them to go. We'll see what the numbers come back as, but we are playing with that kind of end piece right now, just to finish it off so it feels like it's a full, complete thing, and both ends are, kind of finished. So...
Yeah, it's super exciting to start seeing an actual version of the thing after the work is starting to go into it, and it's becoming unique, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, well, there's so much uniqueness in this game, especially compared to Dungeon Drop. carries forward the unique gimmick of the the drop, which is awesome. But then there's so much more stuff that you've built into it, and the nav tool is just another example of, I think, something that's really going to set this game apart. I hope that's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Scott, there's another type of ship in this game that has yet another type of movement in the solar system or the galaxy, and those are pirates. So tell us how pirate movement works and how it's different from rocket drive and drop drive.
Yeah, sure. In certainly the current version of the game, which is we're really enjoying playing right now, the pirates start on the 5 kind of core homeworlds that get dropped into the system. And when you visit a planet to do business there, part of what's triggered is the launching of any pirate that happens to be at that planet into the system. And that would happen, as you might predict, by, it drops in over the sun and pops up somewhere in the universe. But here's where we got to borrow a little bit of fun from the Dungeon Drop expansion, where we were able to kind of almost like build in like a little primitive, simple AI into our pieces, so to kind of breathe a little life into them. The huge monsters there have some movement that happens once they're already dropped in. And these pirates, once they're in the system, they start to behave in certain simple ways. So one pirate, for example, is seeking out just whatever the nearest bit of space junk is, the nearest hulk, and moving to the closest one, and kind of, gobbling that up. And the theory here is not only do they move a little bit through the system and actually kind of appear alive to the players who are playing, but they also ramp up their potential bounty. So as this thing moves around and gobbles up more space junk, the value, the reward of taking it down, you get to kind of crack it open and gobble up all the space junk that it captured. So it sort of did a little bit of its work, of your potential work for you, if you were able to kind of defeat it in combat and take what's inside. So they kind of move in different ways through the space, and as they're doing that, steadily build in potential value to the players. And one minute you might be kind of ignoring that it's moving around you a little bit, but the next minute you're like, oh no, it's actually worth it. Maybe I'm going to engage my drop drive, head over to that area of the tabletop, and see if I can crack that open and take all the asteroids inside, or something along those lines.
Yeah. And it occurred to me, I think I meant to bring this up earlier, even on one of our Dungeon Drop live streams, to talk about how we struggled with, both of us. I'm going to say the words passive and active. I think that's the easiest way to think of this. So what Scott just described, the behaviors, which is essentially an artificial intelligence that we've built into the game, right? So when the pirates go, this is how they move and behave and what they do. Now, same thing with Dungeon Drop with the huge monsters. They each have a behavior when they trigger. Now, one of the things that Scott and I really struggled with, kept wanting to add in passive abilities on the huge monsters. Yeah. So, for example, a Flame Demon might say every time a player loots a room within 1 card length, it does a point of damage to them. That would have been a perfect ability. But that's a passive ability. That means every time someone else is going and taking their turn, not only do they have to think about all the things their character can do and all the things in the dungeon that they want to collect and their different abilities, they now have to think about the passive abilities of all the huge monsters that happen to be around, and am I triggering it or not? And at some point, it becomes information overload. It's too overwhelming. And so we made the conscious decision, at least for that expansion, no passive abilities. So you only worry about what the huge monsters do when they go. Now, maybe in some future advanced expansion, we'll build in passive abilities for some really advanced play groups where they want that extra layer of complexity. But I think here, Scott, it was the same thought process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like another great design point because, again, it's one of those things that after the fact feels kind of obvious. No, you don't want all the players to have to like check over all the monsters or pirates that are in the system to kind of read all their cards or read all their information every time they try to do something. I mean, that seems like obvious. Oh, no, no, just let them act when it's their time. But the problem is when you're designing, that possibility opens up all these cool thematic design possibilities. Oh, this monster is going to come in and make all the other monsters stronger or something like that. I mean, it sounds fun. It sounds cool. It's just when you go to actually play it and encounter the kind of pain that is sometimes checking over all that stuff, it's not worth it. So then, we build ourselves a new box to work in and find out that, with a little bit of extra creativity, you can actually accomplish a lot of the things that we thought could only be done kind of more of in a passive model than a more active model. But yeah, we certainly carried over that thinking here.
While being infinitely... So yeah, we carried over a lot of the same thematic elements, but to the active model, which is now infinitely easier to manage and absorb.
Yeah.
And it doesn't create information overload. And I think those kinds of nuggets of... I think it was brilliant. I think where you landed ultimately with the huge monsters, with that decision, I really consider that one of the brilliant aspects of that design, because we were able to build these behaviors that feel unique and rich in the dungeon, but are super simple to execute. And I think that's what almost all game designers try to do with their AI models for solo mode or a co-op mode versus the big bad or whatever it is. But I think sometimes they can become so hard to manage. It's AI, right? It's another player essentially that's automated, but now it takes us to do the work for that automated player. Here, we did the exact opposite. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, we definitely try to keep it streamlined, and hopefully players see that when they play the game. What happens is that things layer. Operating one thing like that, like having to check one card, is one thing, but then 2, 3 of these things layer in, and suddenly something that was fun becomes something that is no longer fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Welcome questions, comments from the community. Anyone watching along? Anything you want to know about tonight's topic? Ship navigation, the nav-tool, the engineering that went into it. We're not done yet, but by all means, we're feeling really good about this. We have many more topics still to come. Last week, I think I gave an upcoming preview of this week. So now next time we meet, what's up on our docket is mining and selling cargo. So you hear us talk all the time about collecting asteroids, but what does that mean? What do they do? How does the market work in this game? How does selling work? How does mining work? So we'll talk about all that kinds of stuff on our next call. And then there'll be plenty of other topics after that. So, we also put up a poll on our Facebook group. We were asking for what kind of traditional science fiction universes or tropes or thematic ideas are exciting to you. Everything from time travel to little furry balls that are alive. I'll not use their name. But we can pull in... This is truly an open-ended sandbox universe that we can pull in just about anything. And so we're going to have fun during this Kickstarter campaign, working with you all, coming up with ideas, and literally, this is like even more than Dungeon Drop. Anything wacky and out there can be pulled in a really cool, creative way. So we are super stoked about that. So let us know what your favorite things are. The first poll we put out there, I really just labeled it as the different universes, like Star Wars, Star Trek, etc. Probably shouldn't have made it that generic because, of course, Star Wars is number one. Everyone wants Star Wars. But it's more so like what elements of these, like I said, Doctor Who. Well, Doctor Who could be about when a monster that when you look at it, it disappears, or the time travel aspect, or a universally useful screwdriver tool. Like, those are the kinds of things. Like, what are the wacky, cool things in all these different universes that you'd love to see how we could come up with something in this universe? So let us know.
I can't wait to get into that. I was happy to see. We had created an initial list and got some of our favorites on there. But it's always great. The minute you start interacting with the community, immediately cool stuff starts to come out. Like one of the high ones on the list that I mentioned to you right away was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a book I love, but my initial list didn't even cross my mind.
Same here. Same here.
So you gotta plug in with the people, and good stuff always comes out of it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Any parting thoughts for folks tonight, Scott?
Obviously you guys can see, hopefully, that we're excited about this piece of it, because it really is the core, these different ways that people move. I think, it might still be a little bit hard for people to picture until they kind of see this combining with the tabletop, especially if you haven't seen Dungeon Drop, but maybe even if you have. But this is the stuff I can't wait till we have the campaign and people can see, the graphics that we'll put together to really communicate how all these different elements we're talking about kind of click together. But just super excited to be talking about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I see Fiznet, Kirk, I think Darren's here, a couple others. So thank you all for chiming in and listening in. We'll be back at it. We'll let you know and set up an event on Facebook again for the next time we meet. Ping us anytime with any questions. Please join the Facebook group for Drop Drive. That right now, that's the best way to stay informed. The Facebook group for Drop Drive. If you're not on Facebook, no problem. You can be on our distribution list at phaseshiftgames.com. You can sign up for that. Connect with us on Discord. We're online all day, every day. We'd love to chat with you, hear your thoughts, hear your wishes. Join us in this infinite science fiction universe that we can truly do anything. So with that, again, Jason with Phase Shift Games here with Scott. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an awesome evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.